Well, welcome again. Ukrainian troops have begun withdrawing from the outskirts of Severodonetsk city of Luhansk while using butterfly mines to hinder the movement of Russian forces and pro-Russian militants. Local militia members say that at present, 80% of Severodonetsk is controlled by Chechen special forces and Luhansk militia forces, who are shrinking the encirclement of the key stronghold of the Azot chemical plant. Now, at the same time, Ukraine says the Azot plant does not have an air raid shelter like the Azov steel plant. Now, currently, about 300 civilians are trapped in the plant. Ukraine has asked Russia to open a humanitarian corridor and evacuate the trapped people to Lysychansk. A battle around the plant has become complicated as Ukrainian forces are taking advantage of the lakes to the southeast of the plant to hold on, with high possibility of receiving replenishments. Large-scale forest fire, probably caused by the exchange of artillery fire, has also made the situation precarious. In the meantime, Ukrainian sappers have removed a 500-kilogram unexploded bomb from the roof of an apartment building in the city of Kharkiv. A bomb which hit a residential building in the city's Saltivka district in March was deactivated the day after the attack, but the non-stop shelling of the area in the weeks that followed made it impossible to remove the bomb itself. A specialist team in the Ukrainian Emergency Ministries used a crane and a forklift to dislodge the bomb from the roof and remove it from the building. Multiple missile strikes also hit the Kharkiv Polytechnic Institute sports complex, with no casualties reported. Emergency services say the fire spread around 200 square meters. Sports equipment, mats, floor, and wall cladding were also on fire. There are no casualties reported either. A shelling was carried out on big objects such as sports halls, schools, kindergartens, assuming that Ukrainian armed forces are staying there. Kharkiv suffered heavy bombardment from the very start of the Russian invasion, which left much of the city of 1.5 million people a wasteland of ruined buildings and debris. Speaking of which, a residential apartment block was damaged in the Russian-backed separatist region of Donetsk on Thursday, what officials say was shelling by the Ukrainian army. Local residents of the apartment building in Donetsk said they took shelter in a basement during the attack on Thursday morning, which reportedly also caused a fire to break out. Later, residents inspected the extent of the damage caused to their apartments. Ukraine routinely denies carrying out any attacks on the two regions that comprise the Donbas, the cell-style Donetsk, and Luhansk People's Republics, where separatists seized large swaths of land in 2014. I want to bring in the VOA's Anna Chernikova. She joins us from Kyiv. Anna, great to see you, and I see you're outside. So Kyiv must be looking great today, right?
Good evening. Yes, it's a great weather and, well, quite a great mood after yesterday's decision by the European countries. So, yeah, today it's, well, quite a nice day, if we don't think about the war, of course.
Yeah. And it's not difficult to think about the war. That's what everyone in Ukraine is thinking about right now. So let's talk about Severodonetsk for a minute. The Ukrainian troops have been given an order to leave, and they're already leaving the city. What does this mean?
Yeah, so today in the morning, it was confirmation that actually Ukrainian forces started the withdrawal from Severodonetsk. We actually, well, this is quite an expected decision, to be honest, because for the past couple of weeks, the situation was really dramatic and very, very difficult. And there were talks that this might happen. So from the very beginning, Ukrainian officials, military officials were saying that it might happen, that one day this would be the final decision. And as what was said today, that it's, for the moment, the task that Ukrainian soldiers have accomplished is a pure heroism, and they managed to, you know, keep Russian forces in this battle for quite a long time. It was not expected by Russian forces because they, well, the plan was to, you know, capture Severodonetsk much faster. So for Ukraine, it was a great battle, and as what we hear from the military is that this is a strategic decision, and Ukrainian forces are moving to another positions which are more prepared for defense and which have been preparing for all this time. So now the main task in this area would be to protect Lysychansk. And this is what we know for the moment. Also, we know that still Ukrainian forces are remaining in Severodonetsk. So it's not that everyone have already left. At least this is what we're hearing. So, of course, we will get confirmation when it is done. But for the moment, we know that probably most of the forces have already moved, but some still remain there. But this procedure is going to be completed soon.
And if the Ukrainian soldiers are leaving, it means the people also have to be on the move, because there will be no protection for them in Severodonetsk. We also understand the Russian forces are also targeting Lysychansk. So what's been happening in that city, and who controls Severodonetsk now?
Well, for the moment, most of the city is definitely under Russian control, and even the territory where Ukrainian soldiers were controlling and were located, it's now basically, in the process of withdrawing. So they're getting out from Ukrainian forces. Getting out from this territory. So for the moment, we cannot say that 100% of the city is captured, because it's still the withdrawal process. But apparently, well, this is what's going to happen. In terms of the civilians, well, unfortunately, a lot of people remain there. In terms of, amounts, we talk about a couple of thousands probably, but again, we will get a final confirmation when this would be, when we get it from the military officials, basically, because for the moment we don't know exact numbers. What we know is that people remain in the city, and Ukrainian forces want to organize, and they are asking Russian side to organize a humanitarian corridor for people to leave. Again, as we already said last week, there were talks about this, but Russian forces didn't agree to organize this corridor to Ukrainian-controlled side. They only said that civilians could leave to the Russian-controlled territory, which is, of course, not a decision for these people. So these people want to remain at the Ukrainian-controlled territory, and now it would be another stage of talks, because, well, of course, unfortunately, people are trapped now, and they will probably have to wait for this military finalization of the military process, and then we'll see if a humanitarian corridor would be created or not.
Indeed. The humanitarian corridor is important, isn't it, so that unarmed civilians, of course, can leave. But we understand the Russians are targeting infrastructure in Severodonetsk. They're targeting schools, in the Donetsk region as well. Just reported now about the attacks there, and they're targeting every building that's still standing at this moment. So what is left in any of these cities?
Yes, this is true, and unfortunately, this is Russian tactics in every region of Ukraine, and we can clearly see it. So we can see that most of the civilian infrastructure was destroyed in the Kyiv region when Russian forces were there, and unfortunately, the same situation is in Izum, which is Kharkiv region. The city is mostly destroyed. Mariupol, I'm not even gonna, discuss that, because Mariupol just completely destroyed. It's a huge city. And basically this is similar what's happening now in Severodonetsk and now Lysychansk, because Lysychansk is already under a very severe artillery attack and bombardment, so for the past weeks. And we can clearly see that, unfortunately, well, people are the target, and the main target. So Russian forces, and actually this is what people who managed to escape this occupied territories are telling. We had a chance to talk to people from different regions, and they all are telling that it seems that the main task is just to destroy the city, just to destroy normal life, and life of people. And well, unfortunately, Severodonetsk is just another city that will follow this destiny, and already following, because we know and we have confirmation that massive amount of infrastructure of the civilian areas are destroyed. So this is just, another war crime that, we just put in the list.
So sad indeed. Beautiful cities coming under, falling into a rubble just because of this war. Thank you again, Anna, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
Well, as Anna mentioned, leaders of the European Union arrived for talks today. The bloc continues to suffer from the ongoing war in Ukraine. I'll talk about the candidacy status of Ukraine in just a bit, but just before that meeting, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz warned that Europe needs to ramp up efforts to cut its dependency from Russian fossil fuel imports. He said this was the reason why the bloc had not only imposed sanctions on Russian coal and oil at an early stage, but had as well worked on adjusting its infrastructure in a way that European countries can import gas from other countries too. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo added that EU countries need to start buying energy collectively and to implement price caps on gas to avert a major crisis in the coming winter.
And the best thing that we can do as governments is support those portions of society that are suffering the most now because of higher inflation. Today there will be discussion. Is there something at the European level that could be done to bring down energy prices, either through collective purchases or something like that? But this is probably a medium to longer term solution. So right now we are all suffering economically because of Russia's war, but we have to remember it's Russia's war which is causing the suffering.
And about that candidacy status for Ukraine, European leaders on Thursday granted the country the much-coveted status to join the 27-nation union, and a bold geopolitical move hailed by Ukraine and the EU itself as a historic decision. Although it could take Ukraine more than a decade to eventually join the European Union, the decision to officially accept it as a candidate is a symbolic step that signals the bloc's intention to reach deep into the former Soviet Union. Russia's invasion of Ukraine prompted Kyiv to formally apply for candidate status and the EU to approve it unusually quickly. Neighboring Moldova was also granted candidate status, while Georgia was told it would get the same once it has fulfilled some conditions. The bloc's leaders stressed that these countries will have much homework to do, and the EU itself would need to change how it works to be able to cope with yet another extension of the club.
We have decided to grant candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova, and we are ready to grant candidate status to Georgia once priorities will be addressed.
This is a very defining moment and a very good day for Europe today. I warmly congratulate President Zelensky, President Sandu, President Zurabishvili. All three countries are part of our European family. We've never let any doubt about that. And today's historic decision by leaders confirms that. Let me stress that I'm deeply convinced that our decision that we have taken today strengthens us all. It strengthens Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia in the face of Russian aggression. And it strengthens the European Union.
Germany and the US say they're working together to counter what they describe as Russia's cynical grains war. Speaking ahead of the G7 summit in Berlin this weekend, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken pointed out that the sides were aware of the deep concerns about food insecurity. The Global Network Against Food Crisis report states that the war in Ukraine poses serious risk to global food security, especially in countries facing existing food crises, including Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Haiti, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Russia and Ukraine account for nearly a third of global wheat and barley, and 2/3 of the world's export of sunflower oil used for cooking. Before Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24, 90% of the grains and sunflower oil was shipped out through Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea, a route that's now been disrupted.
we hear.
Well, more, the G7 summit leaders of the world's largest industrialized nations are set to gather on June 26th to the 27th to discuss, among other issues, the war in Ukraine, of course, and ways to stabilize energy markets in light of the waning dependence on Russian gas. The event, scheduled to begin on Sunday, will kick off with a bilateral meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is also expected to address the meeting remotely. South Africa, India, Senegal and Indonesia are also invited to attend the summit as guest countries. For more on what to expect from the summit, we have joining us the DW's correspondent Lars Holter. Lars, thank you for joining me on the program today. G7 leaders are meeting this weekend in Germany, which is where you are, of course, which currently holds the presidency of the Group of Seven. Who's expected to attend, and what else can you tell us?
Well, it will certainly be a very busy weekend in Germany, and especially in the southern part of Germany near Munich, where this G7 meeting will be held. The G7 group, of course, comprises, other than host country Germany, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Japan, France and Italy. But other than these countries' leaders, there are some special guests invited. Among them is UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres. There's leaders there from the African Union. And then some of the major developing countries will be present as well, among them South Africa, India and Indonesia, as well as Argentina, because in some of the most pressing issues, the G7 wants to make sure to include these very important partners, of course.
Right. And what's on the agenda for the summit?
Well, it will certainly be a very busy weekend in Germany, and especially in the southern part of Germany near Munich, where this G7 meeting will be held. The G7 group, of course, comprises, other than host country Germany, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Japan, France and Italy. But other than these countries' leaders, there are some special guests invited. Among them is UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres. There's leaders there from the African Union. And then some of the major developing countries will be present as well, among them South Africa, India and Indonesia, as well as Argentina, because in some of the most pressing issues, the G7 wants to make sure to include these very important partners, of course.
The main topics, is there mostly agreements within the group, or are there any particularly tricky issues that need to be discussed?
There's actually a lot of tricky issues that need to be discussed, and mainly is really the response to Russia. What is the further and most appropriate response to Russia in this ongoing war? Sanctions, of course, is the #1 solution. There are already tough sanctions against Russia in place, but there should be harsher sanctions that will be discussed. The problem is, and this is where the developing nations are coming into play, a lot of the major developing economies are dependent on Russia financially, economically, as we have also seen for supplies of wheat, of energy. And while some of the major G7 economies can take some pummeling economically because they have a lot of reserves, they are rich societies, the developing nations mostly cannot lose their dependency. They cannot afford to get on the wrong side of Moscow. So that's going to be a fine line that leaders have to talk. Present for those negotiations, by the way, is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will be also taking part in the summit, of course, by a video link, as he, of course, remains in his country. But there definitely will be a lot of discussion about how to respond to Russia, and also at the same time how to further help Ukraine. Currently, there's been a lot of talk about a new Marshall Plan, of course, modeled after and named after the original US-led Marshall Plan that helped rebuild Europe after World War II. And that could include payments by the G7 nations of more than $5 billion monthly to help bring Ukraine back once the war is over.
Well, Lars, thank you for the updates. We know that we can reach out to you when the meeting starts. Thanks again.